It's finally time to do the painting on the surface. See, we are looking down through the top of the piece, and along the edges here are the wooden pieces of the frame that have been glued on. So one of the things I'm going to have to deal with is a way of covering that up so we don't see that through the exterior of the frame. So I've painted some white paint around the edges here. I don't want it to all be white, so I've also laid some pieces of paper to give me an organic shape. So I'm going to spray a little bit to try to brush that back a bit. And still see some of the underpainting through. Pull the paper off. This is what I have so far. Now I'm going to, before I do anything else, I'm going to hit that with the heat gun to dry it. So what I've got so far is very subtle color changes. I'm going to use this black spray paint. It gives me kind of a shadow effect. I don't want to overdo anything. So all of those things just kind of mitigate that frame. You barely even notice that it's there. I can tell it's there, but I still may do more to cover that up. Over here on my piece of glass, where I had previously spread the matte medium, which looks white when you put it on and is dried completely clear. You can see my fingers through here. The next thing I've done is spatter some color over the top of it. Once that dries, I'm going to cut this into strips that I hang over here on my rack. So when I'm ready to, as I say, begin to assemble this painting, I'm going to take these strips and glue them onto that surface, the surface of the painting I just showed you, with using matte medium or gloss medium or something like that, something that will dry, cover the whole thing with polyester resin. I'm going to cut into these transparent strips, peel that up, and that is a piece of the translucent dot paper that I'm going to glue onto the surface of the painting. I'm just hanging them over my rack over here so I can get to them easily. I'll move the rack over closer to the painting. There's the rack with all of the pieces on it. So now I've mixed up in this cup a very thin mixture of acrylic medium or Mod Podge with water, so it will go on smoothly and not make a big thick surface. Spread some on here, and it doesn't matter if it drips and runs because that's all going to get covered up by the resin at some point. And you can always hit this with the heat gun to dry it. And lay that on here. Into that medium. Smooth it out. You want to get air bubbles out of it if you can, because those air bubbles will show. I'll take the click knife here and cut some of this away. because I want that painted edge to show. Turn that away. This green part, take that away. Put several layers of that stuff in different places on the painting, and here's a piece in my hand. I'm going to show you what happens if it folds over, like you drop it, it sticks to itself, and then you got to pull it apart. It's a total pain to work with. The only good thing I have to say about it is that it is the least poisonous of all the procedures here. Now I'm going to go for my bicycle ride, and when I come back I'll be ready to work on it again. Plan for your drying time. When there's stuff that you have to prepare and let it dry, go do something else. Make sure you do it before you go. Otherwise, you're wasting studio time. Okay, I'm back from my bike ride, and this piece has been sitting out in the blazing sun, so it's dry. There are some bubbles in it, like here's one, here's one. I'm going to take my click knife and cut through those to release the air down and push them down. And then I'm getting ready to put the thinnest layer I can make of this polyester resin on top of the whole painting, because the next thing I want to add to it, I need to be able to work on a surface that's not going to pull this stuff up. And the reason I say that I want to make it very thin is that, as I've mentioned before, the resin darkens a little bit each time and then changes the color, and I want to keep it as fresh as possible. I'm going to now mix up the resin that I'm putting on, and this is brand new resin. And as I say, I want to put on a pretty thin coat. So I'm going to pour into the resin acetone. Mix that up. So it's pretty thin. You can see how it pours off of there. I'm going to squirt in. So the hardener, give it a little more, because the lacquer, the acetone probably slow down the drying time. What the catalyst does is causes it to heat up. Okay, so I'm just spreading it on as quickly as I can. Remember, it's going to start catalyzing. Yeah, this looks good. It's not darkening it too much, so I can see all the work that I've done through this. And also be aware that however your brush strokes go on, they're going to dry that way. So undoubtedly I will be sanding, although this first level, I'm hoping not to have to apply any more than 2 coats. So I'm not being terribly careful with this coat. The next time I put the resin on, I will be much more careful with the direction of my brush stroke. I will now try to brush quickly, always in the same direction, not going back and forth. Hold the canister over the brush so the brush doesn't drip on it. So here we are after a day of painting on these parts that I'm adding on. There's still more to go, but I've been adding these pieces of acrylic to the painting. I'm probably going to spray back into some areas before I put on the next coat of polyester resin. All right, so I went for a bike ride, cleaned the fish pond filter, rebuilt my wife's clothing rack, and now I've sprayed some shapes onto here, and I think I'm ready to put the next layer of resin on. Once again, I'm going to thin it down with acetone before I put it on. Then I'm going to let that dry while I get ready to head off to Iceland for 2 weeks. So we'll finish it when I get back from Iceland.